Picture this. The journey ahead starts here together, and together we can build a brighter future. You are listening to Illuminating Hope, a podcast of Hope House. Yvanna Duin is originally from Hidalgo, Mexico. She moved to the United States when she was 14 years old and graduated from Sylmar High School in California, 1991. Following graduation, she moved to Arkansas and she began a career in radio. In 1999, Yvanna moved to Kansas City where she helped open the first 24-hour Spanish-speaking radio station, Zeta. Here she met her husband of 22 years. In 2015, Yvanna and her husband had the idea to open their own radio show, and La Mega KC was born. Yvanna and her husband have 3 amazing daughters. La Mega has become a staple in the Latino community, serving as a key resource for information. In 2023, Yvanna and her team at La Mega implemented a new monthly segment that features a Hope House advocate and discussions about domestic violence in the Latino community. Yvanna is an advocate for domestic violence survivors and believes no person, woman, man, or child should be someone else's victim. She is proud to support Hope House and victims of domestic violence. Yvanna Gutierrez is a Mexican-born immigrant who came to the United States at the age of 5. She is very passionate about working with the Hispanic community, having witnessed domestic violence being dismissed and labeled as machoism culture. Fortunately, her parents taught her otherwise. They instilled in her the belief that just because someone is considered normal, it does not make it okay. Yvanna now applies the same principle in her efforts to educate the Spanish-speaking community about domestic violence by joining forces with La Mega, collaborating with existing community partners, and working with local schools. She aims to reach the Spanish-speaking population and provide them with crucial information. Her hope is to empower individuals to leave abusive relationships and seek help when needed. Yvanna and Yvanna, welcome to the Illuminating Hope podcast. Glad you're here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yvanna, you were our Hope House Visionary of the Year. Tell me about that.
Just for the simple fact that Hope House thought of me as the Visionary of the Year, knowing what they do for a living, I think that means a lot to me. It's a very pretty experience, very humble. I'm not gonna cry this time because I did when I was doing my speech, but it was great. It was great. My kids were like, "Wow, Mom, that's amazing." Because it really brings all the hard work that you do in radio. It's like, hey, I'm doing something right. For me to be nominated, for me to get that award, it was just amazing. Another accomplishment in my resume, so it was great.
Now, I know that you and Yvanna do a radio program and it reaches our Spanish-speaking population. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about what you speak about, who you would interview, or if you do any interviews on the radio program, and then shout out what the radio program is so people can look it up.
Well, Yvanna has been coming to our radio station, which is La Mega KC, Spanish radio, for, oh my gosh,
a year and a half.
Mm-hmm. And every month she talks about different topics. I think the main focus of the interview is just to bring awareness to the Latino community. There's a lot of resources out there, but for the Latino community, if you give it to them in their language, which is Spanish, it means a lot to them. And so Yvanna can say that, we talk about a little bit of everything every time we get together, right?
Anna and I, who's one of my coworkers, we come up with a list of topics and we're like, how are we going to tackle this? So we take a look at the month. For example, in the month of June, Pride Month, we talked a little bit about domestic violence and how that looks different in heterosexual relationships versus gay or lesbian or other types of relationships. So we like to educate as much as possible because, one, an underrepresented community already, but two, it's in Spanish. So you're trying to reach the target audience by making sure you're speaking in their language, talking about what that looks like and how to reach out for help if they do find themselves in a situation.
And I think after we started doing those interviews, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some of the numbers have increased.
Yes.
There's been people that have been able to reach out to Hope House, especially with the Latino community when it comes to sexual abuse, marital abuse. You know it exists, but nobody talks about it.
Right.
Because you're brought that way when you are a little girl. You stay there and you put up with it. That's your husband, that's your wife, and you're married until death do you part. But that's not a way to live. So us talking about it, and just, I always say repetition is the mother of learning. If we say it and say it and say it, sooner or later that person's going to say, you know what, I'm just going to do it this time. I'm going to come forward. And if we can save one person at a time, I mean, that's one less person that is going to suffer and go through that horrible situation, because nobody has a right to treat you the way some of these women and men get treated.
You know, when we talk about domestic violence, it is very hidden. People don't talk about it due to shame, or fear is often one of the reasons too. But it's even harder when you don't speak the primary language that's in the community. The services that we offer, we really do want to make sure that we are available to everyone who needs our services. So trying to break down what those barriers are. And I think what you guys are doing is one of those ways that those barriers get broken, because you are speaking the language and letting them know that we can be of service to them, and we have people here who will be able to speak with them and be able to help them. So I think that's really important to know, because it's hard to talk about domestic violence anyway.
Yeah.
And then when you have this language barrier on top of it, that just complicates it even more.
It helps too to understand the culture, right? So I think me being Hispanic and understanding my own culture and knowing that, yes, most of domestic violence happens behind closed doors, but there's that cultural aspect that a lot of other people may not understand. And just as Anna was saying, you're married and that's just how you have to accept it. That's your husband. So understanding the cultural barriers as well, besides just the language and the shame and the guilt that comes with cultural biases and stereotypes that come with it, coming from a place of understanding really helps as well.
What are some of those barriers, those cultural barriers that you guys see?
So for example, machismo culture very much exists in Hispanic culture. Sometimes what we think or want to associate as, oh, that's just the man of the house, that he takes my money because he's the man of the household and doesn't let me work because he's the man. Things that we just underlying understand that that's just the man's role. We don't assimilate to or relate it back to our domestic violence, the roots of it, right? So the financial abuse of it, taking your money, hiding your money, or being in charge of all finances 100% without including anybody else in it. A piece of it, right? We're just talking about the financial piece, but if the cultural aspects tells you that's normal, you're not even going to associate that to the overall bigger picture of domestic violence.
Right. So that red flag isn't going to be there for you, because that's just part of your culture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think kind of like that happens with men, because, we always, when we talk about domestic violence, we always think it's the man doing it, right? But then, like we were talking about in one of the radio shows, is that the number of men that are coming forward and saying, hey, my wife or my girlfriend is being abusive, and especially with the Latino community, it's kind of like, oh, because you're a man, you're supposed to be tough, you're supposed to take it, you're supposed to be macho. For you to say, oh, your wife hits you, is like, people make fun of them, people will bully them, and so that makes it hard for them to come forward. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or a child, abuse is not right. And so I think for the Latino community, for us to bring a program in Spanish, it doesn't matter even if you're bilingual, just going back to your native language, which is Spanish, it's a lot more comfortable for you to come and say what you feel, and it makes you a little bit more confident to be able to express the feelings that you're going through in Spanish. It's so much easier for them, and it brings them a little bit of ease to each one of them.
Can you talk about, going back to the cultural barriers that you were talking about, what are some of the ways that you can address that and still honor the culture that you're from? So if it's the man's role to be the breadwinner and to be the decision maker and handling the money, how do you keep some of that but still address the domestic violence piece?
I think we have to look at intent and level of respect. Yes, if that's how the household runs, where the husband is the breadwinner and the decision maker, but is it making decisions against their partner? You have to think about, was there a conversation that was had while he ultimately had the final choice or whatnot? But coming from a level of respect that it's whatever decision is being made is not going to hurt his partner or his family, it's going to benefit everyone. We're not trying to undo the culture. That's a bigger problem we have to tackle. But is it a respectful conversation that was had? And I think education is the number one thing on that. Did your partner take into consideration your wishes or your desires or your opinion before making that decision?
I think it's very common for, within the Latino community for the man to be in charge of everything. But like Viviana said, is it is it a good thing? I mean, I can tell you from personal experience, I've been married for 22 years and I'm pretty much like the decision maker at the house because my husband was raised in a household where his grandmother, she was the boss. Whatever she said was done. Grandpa, he was like, but he stepped up when it needed to be, it needed to be done. And so my husband, the minute we got married, he said, okay, you're in charge of everything. The financials, household, the kids, I'm here to support in any way you want. I remember one time talking to my family because I'm from Mexico, he's from South America. And so I was telling one of my uncles about our relationships and everything. And so my husband came up to me, he's like, hey, would you give me, $5 to go get, can't remember what it was. And my uncle looked at me like, what? How dare you hold the money for him? I mean, that's his job. He should be giving you the money, not you. And I was like, it's okay. It works out for both of us. I mean, it doesn't make him less of a man and it doesn't make me a mean person. It's just because we have this partnership. It also has, like Viviana said, it has to do a lot of it with education and just, is it a good thing? Okay, then let's keep doing it. But if there's something toxic in there, it's not right.
What we talk about in terms of Hope House is valuing and respecting a person's right to make their own decisions and to live the life they want to live. And if that means that you have reversed roles and that works for you, that's wonderful.
Exactly.
That is absolutely okay. But I think that there are pockets or places where that's not okay. So for some people, they're like, I really have to go back to these traditional roles or whatever. And that's where the problem comes in. If it's not, as you said earlier, it's not a mutual decision. We're not about saying to people, you're doing it wrong. You have to do it this way. We're about what works for you.
Exactly.
And if that works for you, then that's wonderful. Like, I don't cook. My husband does not want me to cook because I'm not a good cook. He cooks really, really well. He does it very, very well.
I'm right there with you.
So I do other things because that's what works for us.
Exactly.
And nobody, to come in and say, well, that's your role to do that. And he'd be like, no, I want to eat. I don't want to. I don't want to. Exactly. I do not want to eat. Ultimately, what we're about is self-determination and allowing people to make the decisions that work for them.
Exactly.
And we have to be able to share that with people. And I think what you guys are doing is be able to reach a population that we have traditionally struggled in reaching. I do want to go back to, we did the interview. I came with Viviana to that first interview, and I didn't know what anyone was saying because, unfortunately, I took French. I did not take Spanish, so I don't know. But you chose to do something at that point because we just came in for an interview. That's all we came in for. One session to do this interview. But you made a decision and called back and said, this is what I would like to do.
Yes.
Talk about what helped you make that decision or what drew you to make that decision.
I think the impact that the first interview did on some of the community, and I think also seeing the need that is out there for our community to be informed, that there's resources out there, that there's people out there that can help you. It's hard enough moving to a country where everything is different, the language, the food, the customs, and then being away from your family, come into a world where if you are in a relationship where your partner is aggressive, and then not being able to call your family home and ask for help, but you have someone like Hope House that is here to help you, I think that's kind of the impact that I saw coming. Now, I'll be honest with you, I was telling Viviana the other day when we do our interviews, because we do on Facebook Live also, the number of views when you're doing it live, it's small sometimes, but then after the interview is over, we see those numbers rise. Why? Because when you go live on Facebook and you click on it, your name's going to show up. So that person that's been abused is not going to watch it. It's going to watch it later when nobody knows that you were watching that show. So I think because our radio station has become the key for the Latino community as a source of information, education, I think it was a given for us to have Hope House to be a part of La Mega family. And so I just hope really that every month that when we do these interviews, if we can impact one person, we've done done her job. Sorry.
We all feel the same way. We absolutely all feel the same way, and that's why we come to work every day. Is there could be one person. There could be one person when I'm speaking out in the community that now we're working on a preventative measure. There could be one person when Viviana is working in the community or talking with a client, and you've helped them with their livelihood or to keep the lights on. And that's what I want to talk a little bit about. Viviana, talk a little bit about what you do here at Hope House.
As a community services manager, I supervise a variety of programs, but the one I want to focus on today is our outreach case managers. So specifically, Anna, who is the bilingual case manager, she is focused on reaching this target population that we're talking about today. So she provides outreach case management services to those in the community, but that need a little extra help. Maybe they don't need emergency shelter, and it could be that they need that as well, so she'll help coordinate that. But typically, they just need a little extra help. So getting a restraining order, an ex parte, getting the full order of protection, helping with pressing charges against their abuser. Maybe they didn't know they could. A lot of our population is miseducated. Sometimes their information comes from their abuser. So the abuser says if you call the police, you're going to get arrested because you're undocumented. So we're here to try to reverse that, educate our clients and say, you can press charges against an abuser and you will not be deported because of it. So that's what Anna's role is here. And we've already seen some success from the radio show. We've had 4 successful clients contact us and work with Anna and get those restraining orders, get charges pressed. And we've been doing it a year and a half. So we can't wait to see what that looks like moving forward. Providing the services in the language that you're comfortable with just means so much. Again, that education piece. So Anna's here. Sometimes the phone call is just some information, and once they get the information and understand that they have a lot more rights than they initially thought they did, that's when they're more interested in like, okay, I'm ready to move forward and do that because I didn't think I could. So as soon as someone tells them that they can, that's what Anna's there for, to help and guide that hand, lead the way, and provide all the information that is available to help guide that survivor in making their decision what's next. And we're happy that it has worked. Her caseload is about 40% Spanish speaking, so we're really happy that that program is working because the need was there, right? We saw it when Independent School District reported that about 40% of their population is Spanish speaking. So we saw the need there, and luckily we're able to fill that need.
I think a couple of things just came to my mind. One is, of 4 people that listened to the radio show and contacted us.
Yes.
My guess is there's a whole lot more that didn't make the connection, because you just never know when you're planting a seed with someone or when you're connecting with someone. So they may have listened to the radio show a month ago and they may not contact us for another 3 or 4 months.
Right.
And they may never say, this is how I came to you. But knowing just by having that radio show, you're planting the seed and you are putting it out there for people to connect when they're ready. It just makes my heart happy, what you guys are doing. The other piece of it is that we have learned that in our community, we're seeing a rising population of Spanish-speaking individuals. So we know that need is there, and we are continuing to look at ways of how we can meet that need and address that need, because it's hard enough to deal with domestic violence, but then when you add those other barriers on top of it, it just makes it that much harder.
And the community sees the need too. Just yesterday, Anna and I went to the Kansas City Police Department's first Spanish-speaking Citizens Academy.
Wow.
So we're not the only ones that see this need, and the more we can collaborate with the community, whether it's La Mega radio station or the police department, like, we want to be involved and be present, and the more we show our face, the more the population will remember us, right? So if we're trying to reach the clients that we want to reach, we have to be in their space, and we have to be consistently present so they can remember our face. So the next time they have a situation or know a family or friend, they have, Viviana was just at the radio station, or I remember seeing them at the police academy. We want to be present and available. Word of mouth travels very quickly, I think, in general, but especially in the Latino community. If we help one person, that one person's going to tell their friends and family, and it'll just go from there.
Another thing also real quick that we need to keep in mind is that there's a lot of people that have moved here from other parts of Latin America. We have people from Mexico, we have people from Guatemala, Honduras, Salvador, and unfortunately in some of those countries, Central South America, America, also in Mexico, the culture is you don't call the police sometimes for help. You don't have resources out there that are going to help you. So it's very hesitant and it's hard for someone to come forward. So every time we get on the radio and we say, hey, Hope House is here to help you, you're planting that seed of encouragement. So sooner or later, that person's going to come forward. Another thing that we also need to keep in mind, these people, our community, a lot of them, they've been raised that way. They lived that way for many years. So they thought that was a normal thing. So for someone else to come up to you through the radio and say, that's not a good thing. That's not a normal thing. It's not okay for your husband to hit you. It's not okay for your husband to pick you up in the house and take your money. You are having to reprogram their way of thinking. And so you're not going to do it in a month. You're not going to do it in 2 months. It might take 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. And then finally that person's going to say, oh my gosh, I am being abused. I am in a toxic relationship. I do need to get help. Oh wait, I can go to Hope House and get that help. This is a long way from getting everybody in a safe environment. Like I said earlier, every month we might sound like broken records. I mean, hey, if we can make a difference on somebody's life or somebody else have the resources on how to get out of a relationship like that, I think that's the whole point of everything.
And even if it's just to call the hotline and talk to someone, or to call you, Vivian, and to say, okay, I have these questions, I heard you on the radio, and tell me about this, or what are my resources. I think one of the things that we try to make sure we say over and over, that you don't have to come into shelter. You can get services from us without having to, you don't even have to leave the relationship. If you're not ready to leave the relationship, you can still access our services. We can still be helpful to you in whatever way you're ready and wanting, that there's not an expectation on our part of what you do or how you're ready. We meet you where you are. If that means you stay in that relationship, that's your choice.
Right.
We may help you safety plan, and we may help you figure out ways to keep yourself safe, but we're not going to tell you that you have to leave. We're not going to say, you're wrong for making that decision. We're going to say, we're here to walk with you, whatever path it is that you're taking.
And I want to go back to something you asked earlier about the cultural biases and aspects. One of the things that we really emphasize in the radio is the need for therapy. I think therapy in general, and even in American society, people have a lot of stigma. That's tenfold in the Spanish-speaking community. If you are going to therapy, it's because you're crazy, right?
Oh, yes.
Is what a lot of Spanish speakers will say. And we're here to try to undo that. And like Anna said, it might not be in a month or two, but the more you hear it, the importance of therapy, even if you've been out of a relationship, right, and you're like physically safe, those triggers, that trauma, it still exists internally.
That's right.
So we try to really emphasize the need for therapy for both adults and children. As we know, children sometimes internalize that, blame themselves, or question a lot of things about what they saw. We try to emphasize the need for children's therapy as well, and explain the difference and how it's not a child sitting with a therapist, across an office sitting and talking about their experience. That will look very different for children. So even that knowledge and education again on therapy, we really try to emphasize every time. No matter what the topic is, we try to really bring that home.
I'm of the persuasion that therapy is really wellness. It's just like any other wellness visit culturally. That's what I believe, but I can understand that barrier if culturally that is not what the Latina community believes.
Yeah.
That was the thinking when I first started at Hope House. I am a therapist, and I started out as the therapist for the women in shelter, the first one. And people in the domestic violence community were appalled. They were absolutely appalled that I had a job. They were like, wait a minute, you're saying that battered women are crazy. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not. I'm saying domestic violence survivors have been through trauma, and they have had many, many things done to them that they need to have some support around. They need to have some ability to heal from. So me being here is my way of saying, I support you. It is not about saying you're crazy.
Yeah.
And it took a long time for people to kind of come around. Now it's not uncommon to have therapists as part of a domestic violence program, but when I started, it was taboo, and I got shamed and shunned in meetings. Like, oh my gosh, people literally were stunned. I understand that piece of it, that it takes a long time. And I will put a plug out. We need therapists in general in our community, not just for domestic violence, but for all mental health issues. But Spanish-speaking therapists are in high demand, and people really, really would like to see more people coming through that have the ability to offer both English and Spanish.
I think mental health in general is one of the big problems in a lot of the countries, and we see that every day. Because I think if you're okay mentally, if you're good, you wouldn't do the things that some of the people do. I mean, if I'm okay, if I'm content and if I'm happy with myself, I'm going to be nice to everyone.
Right.
But when you have frustrations, you always look at someone to take it out on. And unfortunately, sometimes that's your spouse, or that's your husband, or that's your child. Yvanna, you hit it right on the dot. Because I remember we never heard of the word therapy when I was growing up. I heard of the word later, and I would tell my friends, oh yeah, I think I'm going to go to therapy. Or you would tell your mom, I think I'm going to go to therapy. Go do something. Go sweep, go mop, go do something. They wanted to keep you occupied, but what they really needed was you just want someone to listen to you and not say anything bad. And that's what therapy is for. I vote for therapy, and I think that's another topic with our community that we have to work on. Because you say, oh, therapy means crazy. No, it does not. It means healing yourself.
And I think as a community, as a whole, we're talking more and more about mental health.
Yes.
And supporting mental health. Nobody really questions if you have a broken leg. Nobody's going to say to you, "Don't go to the doctor."
Mm-hmm.
But if you're struggling with something emotionally, somehow that's different than a physical ailment.
Do you often hear of a generational trauma because of the conversation we just had with the lack of therapy? Do we see clients come in with a lot of generational trauma, or clients you've talked to in the community?
Yeah, I would say so. Sometimes it's that learned hopelessness almost, like, well, my mom didn't know what to do, I don't know what to do. This happened in my family growing up, and it's just part of our lives, so I didn't build that resiliency. We definitely hear and see a lot of our clients express that. What we also see is they're trying really hard not to pass it on to their own children. They're coming to us. Some clients say they're realizing for the first time what they saw in their mother is happening to them. They don't want to pass that down either. So it can come in both negative and positive views, but I think clients reaching out in general, they have an understanding that if they don't do something about it now, that generational trauma can continue.
Right.
I think a great point is the educational piece, where we are raising more awareness today, I think, than we've raised, and reaching a lot of different cultures than we've raised in many years. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's helping, because you both had talked about education and how with your culture it's hard to get. What do you think is the biggest barrier to just that educational piece?
There's so much to it. There's so many layers.
Yeah, I think one of them is finding the resources to get that information to them in their own language. It's also very helpful. Another barrier would also be, it will take a while for them to get that courage and confidence to call trustworthy. It's like, oh, it's too good to be true, I don't think that's going to happen. Or that fear that, what if I do come forward and my partner finds out, it's going to get worse. Maybe I'm just better off dealing with it. Another one of the things is that when it comes to threatening, this is the price I have to pay. I think there's a number of barriers, but if people just trust Hope House does, it will change things around. It will really make a difference on a lot of people.
I think one of the barriers too is just the working class, right? So maybe I don't have time to go to therapy because I'm working, because I have to provide for my family, because if a victim does decide to move out of their abusive household, now they're the primary breadwinner, and now they have to work double to provide for their family without relying on their previous partner. So there's layers, right? It's a multi-layer barrier, because if you need to prioritize your financial needs, then maybe the mental health and the healing is going to be later. And when is later?
Well, and often you're not putting yourself first.
Right.
You're putting your family comes first and your needs come later. So if I'm having to decide between whether I'm going to work, and then I have to get dinner ready, and I have to help homework, and I have to do activities, my needs are going to get pushed back. And I think we see that a lot. So I think in that respect, we meaning Hope House, we need to come up with ways to address those barriers. How do we reach people in ways that will work for them? And I think that's where, the radio station is one way that is very effective in reaching people. What else do we need to be doing? We've got brochures in Spanish, but are we being in the right places at the right time with those materials to reach the people that we're trying to reach?
And also churches are very helpful, because a lot of, in the Latino community, you go to church every Sunday, you go to church during the week, be at every single event so that there's out there for the community. Hand out flyers, brochures, just talk to people and say, here we are, Hope House, we're here to help. Like you said earlier, you don't have to leave your house if you don't want to, or you're not ready to, but if you need therapy, if you need someone to talk to, we're out here. And just getting out there, and talk to the community, and I think that would just also make a difference on how people can reach out to you guys.
Where have you gone, Viviana? I know Yvanna has done some resource tables. What places have you gone to try to reach the Latina community or Spanish-speaking community?
Specifically in the schools.
That's great.
Yes, we try to participate in any back-to-school events or end-of-year events. The Boys and Girls Club is a really big one for us. Anywhere where children are, we're trying to be. Trying to catch the parents, trying to catch the moms, trying to catch dads, trying to catch auntie, whoever is going with the children, trying to provide all the information, both in English and Spanish, just in case. We're, again, planting seeds. That's where we focus a lot of our attention and intentional presence is the schools.
Do you find that with Latina children who were born and raised in the United States, are they Spanish speaking as well as their parents?
The majority, I think first generation, they are. For instance, like I was born in Mexico, my kids were born here, they all speak Spanish. And it also has to do a lot with the parents and where they live. I mean, I know people that they don't speak Spanish in the household. I remember when I moved to the States, my dad said no Spanish allowed in this house. And so I was forbidden to speak Spanish. With my kids, it was the other way around. You're going to speak Spanish. We're going to talk to each other in Spanish. So I think first generation, second generation, you do have the kids that speak Spanish, and they speak Spanish to their parents. And sometimes they'll answer in English. Parent will talk to them in Spanish, but sometimes amongst their friends, they'll talk in Spanish. I think it also comes down to some of them that get embarrassed because the pronunciation is not the right word. But the majority of the people that I encounter, the kids speak Spanish. And you can hear them at the stores talking Spanish to their parents, at events. But now if you're talking about second, third generation, it's probably going to be a little bit harder to find kids that do speak Spanish because it gets lost with time.
Something I want to know with your husband, you guys are same culture, different areas geographically. Mm-hmm. What are some other differences? There are food differences. Any other kind of difference? Does one like spicy food and one like not spicy food and the whole gamut? Tell me everything.
I mean, you nailed it. It's the food, some of the customs, what we eat during Christmas time. I like spicy food. He doesn't. But I think we kind of switched roles. So he's more Mexican than I am. And I'm more Venezuelan than he is. But see, in our household, when we first met, even the words that we would speak to each other, it means something to him and it means something different to me. So there was a few words that he would say to me that I would get really offended about. And I'm like, okay, so wait a minute. Okay, let's put this on pencil, on paper. What does this mean to you? And then we learned not to say those things in front of each other. And even simple things as like fruit, like banana, plátano, cambur. Black beans, for us Mexicans, is frijoles. For them, is caraotas. So it took me a while for me to get used to some of the words. Of course, for him, it was easier because he was surrounded by Mexican people more than I was surrounded by Venezuelan people. We have been able to combine both. I love it. I mean, like for breakfast, we'll make sometimes Mexican food, sometimes we'll make Venezuelan food, and the best of both worlds, I call it.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful too. What did you teach your children? Which language? Or a combination of both?
Actually, my oldest one, 26, she learned English first, and she didn't speak Spanish for a while. Now, my other two, I think they spoke Spanish first. And so when you ask my kids, what's your ethnicity? I'll tell you, we're Venezuelan, Mexican, American. They relate with all three cultures. Like for we celebrate Christmas Eve, the 24th. So it's always a Venezuelan event. Now the 25th, it's our American Christmas. So it's just my kids, my husband, and myself at home watching movies and just eating Chinese food. That's our tradition. And
right.
For New Year's, it's more like a Mexican party. They know how to make a tortilla, which is from Mexico. They know how to make an arepa, which is from Venezuela. And they know how to make hamburgers, which is from the States. So I love it. It's great. So when my daughter, my youngest one, just graduated high school, I made her tassel that goes over her gown. And she asked me to put the American flag, the Venezuelan, and the Mexican flag.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so she's like, because I'm all three. It's funny how, they all can relate to all three cultures.
Is there anything that we missed that you guys would want to bring forward to the community before we wrap up here?
Just get the word out there about Hope House. So if you're going through a situation and you can't get out of it, or even if you get out of it and you go back, it's okay. You can always come back to Hope House. And I think just getting the word out there of all the different resources that Hope House uses to get the word out for the community, we're just educating and helping one person at a time.
Yvanna and Anna, thank you so much for coming on today. This is great, and I hope so many people listen to this, and we'll put a link to your radio station. You said you're on Facebook. We'll go ahead and put a link to the Facebook.
Instagram, TikTok.
Thank you for everything you do for Hope House, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina and Marianne, for supporting us.